Hello, friends. Chris Corsi here, president of Thrive Today, and I want to welcome you to the Relational Skills in Real Life podcast. Friends, I'm glad you're here. So, today's focus is on experiencing a profoundly loving God. That's right. Did you know that this is the end of the year theme for Thrive Today? It's experiencing a profoundly loving God. What a wonderful topic. We want to experience this profoundly loving God. We want to live with the awareness of His closeness, His care, and His compassion. We want to live with that awareness of His presence with us, no matter what's going on, no matter the storms that we have to navigate in this world. We have a God who is near and not far away. Emmanuel means God with us. Friends, learning to live an Emmanuel lifestyle means that we become more and more alive. We become more aware of God's abiding, interactive presence in our lives. For some of us, this is a brand new thought that we didn't know we can live with this awareness of God's closeness. Or maybe we were never taught this, or maybe we were taught something else that God doesn't talk anymore. Well, Scripture tells us that Jesus will never leave us nor forsake us. This is scriptural truth, but it's also reality. Nothing can separate us from God's love. Nothing can separate us from God's closeness and God's presence. And we don't have to wait to die to experience the reality of God's closeness or His loving kindness or His care and His compassion. The Good Shepherd is with us, tenderly caring for us and guiding us in everyday life. Not a moment goes by when Jesus is not with us. He's always with you. He sees you, He hears you, and He understands you. He's aware of the hard times that you're navigating. He's aware of the hurts that you've suffered in life. He's aware of your dreams, your fears, your aspirations. If it's important to you, well, friends, it's important to God. So, as I said, a lot of us just weren't taught this skill that we can live with what we call skill 13 God sight, learning to see some of what God sees, learning to live with that awareness of God's closeness and His presence. Some of us were taught that Jesus doesn't talk to us, right? We have scripture. Well, we do have scripture, and scripture is God breathed, and it helps us learn about God's character and our history of mankind. And we learn about this extremely relational God who wants to be with His children. But friends, God's Spirit is here. He leads us and He guides us and He talks with us. And many of us have now learned to interact with this relational God. But one of the reasons we've added skill 13 to the 19 skills is because this is a foundational skill. The living God is both with us and He talks through us, talks to us. And we can experience what we like to call a mutual mind state where we share thoughts with God. We have God thoughts. So we might notice in a mutual mind state where we have some of our thoughts mixed in with some of these other thoughts that sound like God's thoughts. And with skill 13, we do learn to see some of what He sees, and we do start to live with this a peace, this abiding peace in our lives. So we learn to share thoughts with God through a mutual mind state. And this takes some practice. This takes a little bit of practice to train our brain's attention system to better notice God's closeness, to be able to quiet and to calm the noise in our lives so that we can recognize God's peaceful thoughts in our lives, in our minds, and even in our relationships, that we can practice this together. So the goal here of an Emmanuel lifestyle is first and foremost connection. It's connecting with the living God who's always with us, who never leaves us nor forsakes us. Well, we have a wonderful guest, Thrive attendee Lynn, and Lynn felt like she was missing something in her relationship with the living God. And she's going to share a little bit about how the Emmanuel process and Emmanuel lifestyle has changed everything for her. Let's listen in.
I had always just wanted so much to be intimate with God, and had in some ways, but it was like I'm missing something. And growing in the Emmanuel process, where it's not just words on the page, it's not just singing to Him, but as we learn to go into an appreciation memory and experiencing the joy of a joyful memory. Like I love to go. One of my memories is going to a waterfall and just experiencing all the senses. I love how they emphasize experiencing the senses. Like, notice what you see and notice what you feel and hear and smell and taste, and just re-experiencing that memory in your mind, in your emotions, in your body, like just that invigorating feeling of being near the waterfall, and then inviting Jesus in and cry, experiencing Him where you can either experience His presence or maybe even see Him like standing beside you and enjoying the waterfall together. And it's just made my relationship with God go from, I guess, one dimension to four dimensions. It feels like, yeah, like black and white to color. Um, it has made a huge difference, and makes God seem so much more intimate and real. Like, I had always heard having an intimate relationship with God, and and now I feel like I experience it a lot more.
All right, friends, what a beautiful testimony. I loved how Lynn shared about starting with joy, remembering something peaceful and meaningful really helped her to be able to really notice and let her senses get activated with the responses from these joyful moments. So Lynn shared an important point for us. We start with joy. We start learning to practice interacting with the living God through times of joy. So, looking at trying to find God in the storms and in some of our most painful places is an uphill climb. It's some people can do it, but it's really difficult if we're not used to living and practicing this Emmanuel lifestyle. So, starting with times of joy and then asking God, where are you in this memory of joy? What were you doing? What do you want me to know about your presence in this place? So, for Lynn, this really changed everything. She added the skill of connecting with Jesus in some of her peaceful, joyful places. And then she started to interact with Jesus. And I love the example she gave us. It's like going from black and white to seeing in color. What a beautiful example this is. So we can, like Lynn, grow our bond with the living God. And this does change everything. And you could even see the joy on Lynn's face. You could hear it in her voice. You could see the emotion. You can even notice it in her body and her words that this has deeply, profoundly touched Lynn. So, friends, there's good reasons why it might be difficult to notice God's thoughts and God's presence in our lives. We do need a little bit of training and a little bit of practice, being able to calm and quiet ourselves, being able to get out of enemy mode and get back into relational mode, to get into our peaceful, joyful places so that we can then pause and notice what is God doing here. And as we practice, we can grow this skill and get better at it. We can practice on our own, we can practice with friends or family members. And quieting and appreciation are important parts of this process because some of us need to quiet ourselves before we can notice some of God's thoughts. Others need movement, need activity. They need to go for a walk or they need to go for a run. And that's how they notice some of God's thoughts. But it's finding what really works for you. What do you need to be able to get in a good place where you can just pause and notice God's closeness and God's thoughts? And we remember times, if we've had other times in our life where we felt God's closeness, we spend some time soaking in those memories and those moments. And then we say, God, I remember you being with me over here, but where are you right now as I sit here? And so we're training our mind to be able to go back and forth between times of God's closeness or times of God's peace over here with a place where I'm trying to discover God's peace and God's closeness. So this is the part that just takes a little bit of training so that we can get better at noticing God's closeness. We start looking for him. We start pausing and reflecting and asking, Lord, where are you here? And just as Moses was walking one day and he came across this burning bush, but it wasn't being consumed, his curiosity caused him to pause and to notice, and he found God's presence there. God was there with him. And so we want to take the time and spend time in rest or in movement, practicing with friends or family members or colleagues. And we get really good at noticing God's closeness and God's presence. The friends, these are trainable skills. And I want to invite you to visit thrivetoday.org. And you can go to our God site page, Skill 13, and find resources to grow in the skill. And we also have a Overcoming Your Barriers to Jesus course that you can also utilize to get really good at being able to overcome barriers and obstacles that make it hard for you to be able to notice God's peaceful presence. Friends, I hope and I pray that this is the start of something good for you today.